The Forgotten Realms are no stranger to cataclysmic major events. There have been so many over the eons, they have shaped a world far stranger than your own, and their echoes have left deep scars and crumbling ruins no matter where you venture. The current rise of the human species, when examined against this shattered backdrop, reminds us that even humans are currently living, not in the height, but the slow decline and dark ages of their kind in the shadows of their own lost empires. You would look at the barbaric Uthkart tribes now and recognize they are largely composed of the refugees from the fallen Netheril Empire, or understand that the Thayan wizard selling potions from a wagon in a Sembian market has ancestors who were originally from another planet. The folk of Murghôm, like their neighbours in Mulhorandi and nearby Thay, are largely descended from those same people. Long ago, in the height of their arrogance, the sorcerer lords of Imaskari opened vast portals and abducted thousands of humans to serve as slaves in their empire. Over generations, through toil and hardship and by intermarriage with their captors, these people became known as the Mulan, the ancestral stock from which Mulhorandi and Unther would eventually arise. When the gods of the Mulan broke through the wards of the Imaskari and sent forth their avatars, the slaves arose in a rebellion, and in time the Imaskari dominion was overthrown. The plains of purple dust are the lasting scar on the world left to remind us of this event. From that devastation came Mulhorandi, and later centuries the regions to its east, Murghôm among them, were settled by descendants who still bore the blood and features of those same transplanted humans. Thus, in Murghôm, the people are of dark brown to dusky skin, with eyes most often black or deep brown, and hair straight and jet dark, worn long by custom. Their bearing often strikes outsiders as noble, a proud carriage inherited from generations who look upon their rulers as living gods. Centuries of caravan traffic through the passes of Sapphire and beyond have lent some mingling to their bloodlines. A scattering of lighter skin tones or a slight curl to the hair marks the Sempari or Durpari merchant who once wed into a Murghomian family. Still, the old Mulan look predominates, unmistakably so. Their language remains Mulhorandi, descended from the tongue carried from that other world, shaped by the centuries under divine god kings. It is a measured, formal speech, full of honorifics and elaborate courtesies, often sounding ceremonious, even when bartering over sheep in a dusky village square. The tongue of Murghôm, however, is coloured by its position as a crossroads. Semphari words creep into its lexicon, as do loan words from Untheric and Durpari, especially among merchants. Yet the foundation remains Mulan. One can hear a Murghomian speak and immediately recognize the kinship to Mulhorandi. What we call the common tongue is mostly composed of Chelnadatilar and confined to the private trade talk between merchants. It is not considered polite to speak it in many other situations, and it is poorly suited to them anyway. The language most often spoken far to the west along the Sword Coast is Chelnadatilar, with Alaskan being commonly heard in ports and river trade towns, sailors and pirates, and those who live far to the north, while El-Zedo is the more common tongue in Kalimshan and more cosmopolitan locations where a lot of Kalashite traders can be found. Chelnadatilar, and thus the common trade language, typically uses the writing system called Thorass, while in the old empires you will see what is clearly a writing system derived from Earth's Coptic and hieroglyphic heritage. Though most people will not be very perplexed by Thorass as it is so widespread, and of course scholars or wizards will be familiar with Elven and Draconic text as well as the language of the gnomes, called Nim, which is very well suited to more technical and academic texts. My best estimate is their accent sounds like Egyptian with a hint of Mongolian and Old Italian. The clothing and fashion of the Murghomian people is a combination of influences. Long, flowing robes and sandals, much like those of Mulhorandi, but often with brighter dyes or stitched patterns learned from Eastern weavers. Headscarves and light cloaks are common in the upland villages where the wind can sweep down from the mighty Yahamil Mountains. There are distinct climate and terrain zones which make it easy to tell what area of Murghôm someone is from, just by how they dress for their local climate. Murghôm is a region of contrasts. Its heartlands are the lake shore and river valley country clustered around Brightstar Lake known as Gobnor and the Sapphire water, where fertile alluvial soils and plentiful freshwater support agriculture, orchards, vineyards, and dense settlement. Along the rivers and their tributaries, particularly where seasonal rains provide sustenance, more fertile soils support agriculture, orchards, and settled communities. But once away from the waterways, the land becomes harsher, suited mainly for herding and hardy crops. From those irrigated lowlands, the terrain falls away into semi-arid steppe and scrub, the plains of purple dust and the northern reaches of the Rouran Desert, marking the harsher southern margins. To the north lie the mountains of copper, a cooler, rocky highland band that yields mineral wealth, while the Shalhoond, the great wildwood, and scattered uplands form a natural barrier towards the Tweegan steppes and the spider-haunt peaks. The Rathan Flow and Murghol rivers bisect the realm and are the principal waterways that sustain trade and settlement. And climate conditions range from hot, dry summers on the plains to cooler, snow-touched winters in the highlands and along the mountain flanks. The irrigated lowlands around Brightstar Lake and along the Rathan Flow and Murghol are not merely the agricultural heart of Murghôm, they are the economic hinge upon which every Draconic claim to lordship turns. The campaign guide and the Murghôm entries make plain that Murghôm became a realm ruled by dragon princes, each taking a town and the lands around it as an implicitly hereditary domain and extracted tribute in coin, goods, and service from the humans who lived there. That political foundation, the dragon princes as de facto feudal lords, is the bedrock fact for everything that follows. One very important feature of the region floats 5 miles above the Great Wild Wood, called the Shalhoond, a large earth-mote known as the Dracowyr, at the center of which is a mighty castle-like edifice where the dragons meet to discuss their own politics and affairs. The Great Wildwood marks the border between the nations of the south and the lands of the nomadic tribes of the north. The Shalhoond is home to a population of gold elves who live in a territory called Narbeth. It is largely they who are responsible for the Great Forest being stocked with an unusual richness of game and monsters that the elves are expert in hunting. On the north side of the wood is where you climb into the spider-haunt peaks, known as Chelnadatilar. The 3 major rivers that run from the woods and down into Murghôm are used to transport wood and harvest from that forest. The eastern border of the forest climbs into the mountains of copper, a smaller range but very rich in ore, namely the copper they are named for, arguably the richest deposits on the entire continent, mined for centuries with shafts going for miles and breaking into much older passages, forming a maze in the deep that has never been fully mapped. A home to countless monsters and opportunistic bandits. The centuries of mining have stripped the slopes of trees and streams can be unfit to drink due to toxic chemicals. The fog rolling down from the peaks is often tainted heavily with the black smoke of distant smelters. Settlements around the foothills are dusty and dirty mining guild towns, surrounded by stone walls and watchtowers with folk accustomed to wearing headscarves to filter the soot from the air they breathe. These towns are built up over time around a mine entrance located at their heart. In the Year of True Omens, the same year that King Obold Many Arrows died of old age, a mysterious plague swept through the metallic dragon population of the Copper Mountains, causing many dragons to flee. The ancient blue dragon Skalnaedyr didn't know why it was only harming metallic dragons and decided to err on the side of caution, so flew to Murghôm and stopped to rest near a small village known as Fanaskull. The frightened villagers pledged fealty to the surprised dragon, whose impressive intellect saw the great opportunity presented to him and agreed to rule the village. Today, Skalnaedyr occupies that bedrock as surely as the lake itself. Canonically, he is an elder blue worm, whose name is tied to a city in the river basin. By the published sources, Skalnaedyr is treated as the preeminent prince in Murghôm's late 15th century order. His city controls the irrigated bowels and caravan approaches that funnel wheat and barley, orchard goods such as dates and preserved fruit, and flax for simple linen. The local trade routes thrive under the river prince's oversight. In person, there are some distinct features that make him unmistakable. Aside from his sheer size, he has a notably longer face than your average blue dragon, possibly from an intermingling of his ancestry with the eastern storm dragons. His scales are much sleeker, and he adorns himself with gold and sapphire jewelry, including a crown which complements his raised and gold-coated neck and dorsal spines. He is quite impressive indeed, and wears his scars from battles with many other dragons over the centuries with pride. Even restrained, the dragon fear emanates from him with the oppressive weight of charged humidity before the storm. The very air feels heavy, the body compressed, joints and bones ache, and the nerves spark with tension, like getting the jitters from too many cups of espresso. His voice has crackles in it when he is agitated and takes on an almost sound wave-like robotic distortion, with his roar splitting the air like a thunderbolt. He very rarely raises his voice, though. He has no need to. One other interesting note, Skalnaedyr sometimes has a hacking coughing fit and spits up blobs of toxic green goo, a legacy of his many centuries living in the mountains of copper, but, other than that, seems to have suffered no other ill effects. The goo is of keen interest to the gnomes of Lantan, who think it might make for some sort of storage acid for electrical energy. None have had the moxie to offer to buy any off the dragon, but he probably wouldn't mind. For the right price, of course. The effects of a blue elder on this basin are not restricted to taxation. In play and in text, blue worms skew weather and command storms. In 5th edition terms, the presence of such a lair creates lair and regional effects that alter the local climate and the hazards caravans must reckon with. Thus, the farmers beneath Skalnaedyr learn to read strange lightning and capricious squalls the way other folk read markets. When the prince demands a larger tithe, the stories begin. The lake flashes with blue light on the same nights the tribute caravans leave, and merchants who travel without his sanction risk sudden localized storms that do not trouble the wagons bearing his sigil. For a full accounting of the events that led to this current situation, you can enjoy reading Richard Lee Bayer's Brotherhood sequence and the manipulative influence of the vampiric drake who was called Brimstone. All the dragons involved managed to break the compulsion of the great draconic game called Zorvental, and you can learn all about that in a video on my channel covering all its details. So, on to the next dragon prince, Chelnadatilar, the Gold, who slew the black dragon Fair Zath in the Battle of Luthkek. That single narrative moment, a gold prince killing an evil chromatic worm, is what anchors him in the canon and marks him amongst the surviving princes who gathered afterward. Chelnadatilar's domain is the city formerly known as Murghyr, once the capital city of Murghôm, and still a pivotal crossroads between the river trade and the upland passes, where crafted goods and metalwork move outward. Ceramics thrown from river-clad workshops, cloth dyed in samphire colors, and processed copperwork from the nearer mountains, and preserved orchard luxuries that fetched good prices in distant markets. The Prince of Gold encourages artisan guilds and protects smiths. His patronage has drawn in the region's best craftsmen. Competition among them is fierce and backed upon by the dragon's regional mystic influence. So there is not merely a profit motive, but also a very justified superstition that to produce anything less than the best can lead to not just financial ruin and social isolation, but a slow descent into madness from sleepless nights and dreams plagued by nightmares. For the most gifted and dedicated artisans, however, they wake from dreams and run to their workshops inspired by visions of magnificent crafts and innovative ideas. Chelnadatilar resides in a fabulous palace. Impressive copper sculptures abound, and the palace is surrounded by carefully tended gardens fed by cleverly directed flows of water that fall from raised terraces in misty plumes, casting dazzling light that reflects from the burnished copper artwork. It's one of the most impressive palaces in the realms, if you ask me. Not too far off is the domain of the Emerald Prince Astanalan, who occupies the mineral-rich uplands and rules the population that was once the town called Morten. They extract wealth from the seams of gemstones excavated from fairly impressive open-pit mining operations and are experts both at constructing large earth-sifting machines as well as, when required, some impressive siege engines, forming a special militia of skilled sappers that should not be underestimated. Astanalan is an impressive gem dragon, nearly 100 feet long from snout to tip of his tail, with a sleek and powerful body of translucent green hues. He is typical of his highly intelligent and inquisitive kind, a sage of tremendous skill who knows all there is really to know about the old empires of Unther and Mulhorandi. He spent many centuries of solitude deep in the plains of purple dust, sifting through ruins of ancient Imaskari for lost knowledge. Sadly, he has never shown much interest in sharing this knowledge. Again, very typical of his kind. The folk of Astanalan keep to themselves, tending to have extremely secure homes where their precious stones are protected by ingenious and lethal traps. To cut stones, they hire mercenary companies and trusted merchants to transport overland to the head of the Isfahan River, which leads directly to the Ruathanflow River and onto the Alamba Sea or Brightstar Lake, passing through Skalnaedyr's hub of trade. Astanalan has a particular fondness for the meat of giants and is a leading voice in the Dracowyr Council halls on all matters regarding defending Murghôm from the giants of the Harmauth Mountains to the east. He spends a lot of time observing their activities, a master of stealth and mystical spycraft. He knows exactly when to set off and hunt one down for his larder, and has an impressive collection of decorated skulls, encrusted with precious gems and imbued with interesting enchantments. If you somehow manage to break into his lair without severe maiming or death finding you, you will not find many books in his study, but a lot of talking skulls of impressive size and a comfortable nook for his massive body made from the crafted ancient skull of a titan. Beware the giant lizards common to Astanalan's domain. The locals train them as rather dangerous beasts of burden, presenting quite an intimidating problem for any bandits thinking to score a wealth of gemstones being transported to the river barges, and never trust an old map showing pathways through the Copper Mountains, as they have a tendency to shift and change due to the dragon's regional influence. Another gem dragon, Domborcojh, the Sapphire dragon, rules the isolated peak between the Sunrise Mountains and the Mountains of Copper, overlooking the river Murghôm to the east and the high valley to the south, with the distant Ganathwood beyond that. He is one of the more isolated and vulnerable domains, and puts his considerable interest in all military arts to good use, defending the northern riverway into Murghôm. Any assault from that direction is in for one hell of a nightmare, as the ground opens beneath them and they fall into the clutches of deadly close-quarters fighters who tear their stunned targets to shreds. These warriors count a high number of abjuration specialists in their ranks, as they spend a lot of their time hunting down signs of alien horrors known collectively as aberration. So compared to beholders and the like, a few stunned light cavalry suddenly confined to tunnels and cabins underground pose little challenge. Domborcojh's reputation is well known among the Tweegan horse lords of the Great Northern Steppes, who have learned some bitter lessons on why never to attempt to ride directly into Murghôm along the Murghol River passage. Domborcojh's vassal citizens are highly skilled in the crafting of fine tools and supplies that flow into the lapidary workshops of Astanalan's domain, and join the secure transport system used to move the gems into Skalnaedyr's trade hub. Some of the best armor and weapons are also created by his people, the cream of which is reserved solely for the best warriors in his forces, tasked with protecting their spellcasters at all costs. A large number of rock gnomes and deep gnomes have become stable and productive master armorers, toolsmiths, and underdark scouts in his service. Domborcojh's lair is a spooky place, stocked with giant spiders, his favourite food. It's impossible to enter directly from the surface, and the maze of passages leading to it are spider-infested death traps on top of all the other fiendish traps and guardians he has in place and on patrol at all times. His regional influence overlaps and blends with that of Astanalan, further enriching the huge wealth of crystal deposits which sprout in spectacular formations and form veins of precious stone, which slowly regenerate over time. The two dragon princes share information with each other frequently, using crystals to enhance their telepathic powers. Astanalan has a massive orb, while Domborcojh has a large geochamber he occupies, like Professor X inside Cerebro, his crystal crown glowing brightly and pulsing with power. Any fool who attempts to attack him there is simply going to get pulverized by his enhanced telekinesis before they can lay a finger on him. On the shores of the Alamba Sea, the city once known as Saltim is now Harmauth, the domain of the dragon Harmauthantildarr, the Silver Hawk. The city is also known as Harmauth, City of the Hawk, and indeed, along with a lot of hawk symbolism and such, there are hawks everywhere in the city spires and their brightly gleaming white slate tiles. Pennants of white edges with gold snap in the brisk sea breeze, and the citizens are proud of their reputation as defenders of Murghôm against the nation of Thay. While not stated in canon lore, Harmauthantildarr is, of course, a powerful silver dragon. He doesn't really mind that the local population still tends to worship the untheric god Horus Ray, who is, well, he's very fond of hawks, particularly giant hawks, so he finds Horus Ray's temples and monuments quite aesthetically pleasing. Located on the coast of the Alamba Sea, his powers over the weather render the Thay's naval power all but useless, and his inspirational influence on the hearts and minds of his vassal people spur many to dedicate their lives to defending the peace and sanctity of their lands and way of life. He doesn't stand in the way of their religion. Under his rule, the port city has thrived and grown, with institutions of higher learning teaching the rich history of the Mulan people, subtly casting the nation of Thay as a corruption of their true culture and a blight which has festered too long, its influence spreading like an infection to be curtailed and cleansed from the world. He enjoys walking among the people in their form, but returns to his magnificent natural state when holding court or for special events, festivals, and holy ceremonies. He personally accepts the oaths of paladins and knights who wear their shining silver armor and regal surcoats of white edged in gold. A rare few in his service master the art of riding griffins, despite griffins and hawks not getting along particularly well. The same power over the air that defends Murghome's shores also benefit its own merchant navy fleet, which is now a common sight across the Alamba Sea and the Great Sea of Fallen Stars, connecting Murghome's flow of goods to the central nations and trade ports of Faerun. The sweeping lanterne sails with bright patterns and the sleek hulls of Murghomian sailing vessels make it obvious why they are commonly called dragon ships, not just because of where they come from, but because the sails remind people of the wings of dragons. A lot of the following information on Murghôm is largely unchanged from the more detailed article on Murghôm found in the free-to-access Forgotten Realms wiki. Explore it, know it, love it. A fantastic work by many very dedicated people, with some notable changes which I will focus more heavily on. So, you will notice some deviations as the lore really hasn't been updated in canon sources since like 2011. Obviously, all of the humans of note in the region are gone, and the social fabric of Murghôm has seen significant fundamental changes due to the influence of the Dragon Princes. I'll also focus mainly on information that is the most used for practical gaming purposes. Most importantly, though, is the broader effect on the entire region due to the dragon's presence there and the full implications of what this tells us about the world of Toril. Murghôm has long been a breadbasket for the rest of the realms. Now, more so than ever, the flow of trade through this region links Semphar, Durpar, Karatur, and the distant southeastern coast, and as always, with trade comes the exchange of culture and knowledge. Socially and economically, Skalnaedyr's domain breeds a stratified, conservative elite that wears its draconic association as credential and protection. Merchant families that prosper are those willing to act as tributary collectors and lookouts. Artisan guilds exist because the prince's court demands fine metalwork and enamelware for his treasure hoard, and those guilds obtain patronage and security in proportion to how reliably they deliver goods. In short, the prince turns agrarian surplus into monetary power, and that power funds militias, temple cults that legitimize his rule, and the arcane retainers who studied the old ruins around Brightstar Lake. The nation of dragon princes is not measured by numbers of troops and standing armies. Honor, tribute, and threat are the currencies that move politics. The dragons may be conservative about outright war because their true strength is in long-term dominion, hoarded wealth, and the networks of mortal clients that keep supply lines running. But when they act, the results are decisive. The prince's controls of caravans and passes chokes enemy logistics. They can create extreme weather conditions, sap an army's effectiveness due to nights plagued with nightmares, cause landslides, flash floods, or direct monstrous creatures to swarm from the wilderness at the same time they are exerting economic sanctions and political pressure, paying off mercenary companies and bribing corrupt officials, even seeding agents, shapeshifters, and other covert operatives into the midst of their enemies. The princes are acutely aware of the powers that surround them. To the west, Mulhorandi has risen anew under its gods. To the north stretches Tweegan Steppes, always a potential source of invasion. To the east, Sapphire and the Golden Water carry the pulse of trade into Karatur. To the southwest lies Thay, ever volatile. None of the princes is reckless enough to launch a war without calculating the consequences. Yet in limited conflicts they act with decisive ferocity. A caravan dispute, a rebellious town, or a rival's overreach may draw a sudden strike, a dragon descending in fury, or an army of vassals marching with banners raised. The wider realms has learned to treat Murghôm cautiously. 5 ancient dragons, each with mortal assets and coffers brimming from centuries of tribute, are not a force to be provoked lightly. In a great conflict, they could raise armies, hire mercenary hosts, and bring to bear their own devastating might. For now, their restraint ensures stability, but their very presence keeps the region taut with tension, for the ambitions of dragons are measured in centuries. The trade roads of Murghôm have become remarkably safe from brigands and bad weather, as long as the trade flows and follows the rules. The taxation and tariffs are notably high, but there's no denying, even living under tyranny, the Murghomians are enjoying an era of unprecedented prosperity. Given the full history of the Mulan people, it is clear they were the perfect culture in which dragons could establish their rule with much effort at all. Just a different type of god-king for the Mulan to bend the knee to, and the innate formality and politeness of their language makes them far more tolerable to the dragons' impressive egos and mercurial tempers. Dragons are creatures of magic, and Toril is a magical world. The stable influence of the dragons has had an ongoing transformative and enriching effect on the very land itself, and the ecologies found there. The weave has changed. Some areas disrupted and weakened are now fully restored. There are almost no wild magic areas. Mystic and mythical creatures from Karatur have become widespread in both Murghôm and Sapphire. I have a perfect example of the direct influence of the dragons on local wildlife and natural beasts. These 2 beetles are exactly the same species, one carefully preserved for a century, the other just arrived from an expedition to Murghôm. Clearly, this is the influence of Gem Dragon's regional effect. It is the humanoid races that have been the disruptive and harmful influence across Faerûn for many centuries. The restoration of dragons to their correct apex position is now transforming Murghôm back into what Faerûn always actually was, a land of magic and wonder, a land of balance, and remarkably, a protected and prosperous harmony that I have come to realize is not the great threat I once thought it was. Rather, this is a land of great opportunity that seems poised to spread inexorably to other regions over the following centuries. And perhaps it should. In this video, I've given you my best efforts to update the lore while not straying very far at all from the canon lore, so please use it as a starting point and roadmap for making the rest of the region your own. There are more dragon princes, for sure, and each has its quirks, its local social and political, economic, environmental and mystical influence on its domain. The domains do not stand as isolated as they once were. They blend and often work well together. The dragons choose carefully where they live and what other dragons they live close by to. Their own social hierarchy plays a large role in this also, with more dominant and respected dragons taking their tithe from those below them. Rather than being a distant and unimportant region marking the very eastern edge of the Forgotten Realms world map, Murghôm is actually the perfect place to base an entire Dungeons & Dragons campaign. It has all the right ingredients to cook up a banquet of exciting adventures. For a more in-depth video where I sort of podcast the subject until I run out of breath, please check out my Fourthwall site and become a supporter. My name is ajpickett, your Sage of Candlekeep. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.
Through the Brightstar mist, the river gleams, Mulhorandi tongues in whispered dreams. Skalnaedyr strikes, the sky ignites, lightning scars the fertile night. Oh, lux Draconis, venite ad me, honor tributo, et salsus mer. Copper peaks and sapphire stones, emerald forests twist their bones, oases shimmer, dust winds wail, Mulan blood endures the dragon's hair. Rise Murghôm beneath worm wings, bow Murghôm to the prince's sting. Fires of gold, storms of blue, we live, we die in tribute true. Chelnadatilar's forge ablaze, ceramics, metalwork, woven haze, fertile hands and mortal pride, honor bends where dragons bite. Custodino, Dracon, Lamina et lat, Pax et ira. Through desert sands and snowy flanks, through caravan paths and river banks, fog and rumor, spies and scouts, Harmauthantildarr knows all routes. Plains of purple dust, harsh steps call, oaths carved in stone for one and all. The nation thrives, yet danger breathes in every stone. The dragons say this: Vincer, Sapphire, honor et fee. Murghôm beneath worm wings. Bow Murghôm to the prince's sting. Fires of gold, storms of blue. We live, we die in tribute true. Mountains hum, the ruins sing, gem and copper, arcane spring, emerald moss and sapphire veins, mortals toil, dragons reign. Exo